Baby, I'm playing on you tonight. Hunt you down, eat you alive. Just like animals, animals like animals move.
Hey there, I'm Dave,
And I'm Emil.
and we're here to talk to you today about a really cool topic. What are we here to talk about today, Emil?
It's a process called hydration.
This is hydration?
This is hydration. Unfortunately, this is a whole lot easier to talk about than what we're going to show you, but not quite as cool. Although we love our coffee, what we're actually here to discuss is the process to automate the build of a lab environment. And these can be used, you know, at an organization for testing, new implementations. If you have some software that you want to try out and test before you actually implement that in your production organization, this is a quick way to get all the back-end stuff done that you're really not concerned about. That gives you a working environment to play around with.
So Emil, I have a little bit of a challenge here. Do you think that we could actually finish building an environment that's ready to use for a lab by the time you're finished that Tim Hortons cup of coffee?
Oh, most definitely.
All right, let's see if we can do this. So I'm just going to jump into my other machine here, and let's get right into it. Let's show you how this is done. Okay, so let's take a look at our base machine here. So just to show that we don't have any kind of smoke and mirrors going on with our kind of design in our lab machine. The lab machine that we're building on here today is an HP 8570W. We've got 32 gigs of RAM. And what do we have in there for a solid state drive, Emil?
I believe there's a 700 gig solid state drive.
All right, perfect. So what we're running on here for an operating system, we decided to kind of showcase the latest and greatest technologies from Microsoft. So we're building on the new Windows Server Technical Preview. So this is why we're seeing an issue down at the bottom here where the machine's not able to activate right now. It's just because we're just using kind of a beta build here. But we wanted to kind of showcase that you could run this on either, you know, Windows Server 2012 R2 or the latest and greatest operating system that Microsoft has right now. From a networking configuration, I've got some post-installation network configuration scripts that I normally run, and we'll cover the networking configuration in another video at another point in time. But for right now, this is just pretty much a vanilla Hyper-V machine. I don't have anything configured in it right now, so what I've got is just a blank slate for our lab, and we're going to be kind of ready to go. So the purpose of hydration is really what, Emil? Like, why would we want to kind of automate this process?
So there's really two important factors here. The first is when you're building your lab environment, either at home or at work, the underlying architecture is not really important. You know, you're not documenting, you're going through the process of building virtual switches, of building virtual machines, installing operating systems. You're really more concerned about the product as it is installed. So hydration will automate all of the aforementioned processes to get your vSwitches, your virtual machines deployed, operating systems installed, and everything added into an Active Directory. The other good point about hydration is no matter how many times you build a lab environment using that hydration process, you're going to run into the exact same environment every time. So there will never be missteps, there will never be differences in configurations, and so on and so forth. And that's really important because the back-end systems and the way things are configured could often interfere or inject with whatever you're trying to configure.
So with respect to Configuration Manager, Emil, what are some of the required components in order to build a Configuration Manager lab on your own?
Well, first and foremost, you need to have a domain controller, you need to have an Active Directory. There needs to be a set amount of user accounts into that Active Directory before you can even go ahead with your Configuration Manager installation. The virtual machine for Configuration Manager has some specifics, and there's some post-installation requirements on that server that need to be done before we can even launch the installation. Things like Silverlight, .NET, IIS needs to be installed, so on and so forth.
Awesome. So one of the things that we mentioned earlier was that we could deploy this lab as fast as you could actually drink a cup of coffee. So should we show everybody how we can actually do that?
Sure, let's go ahead.
All right, so what we're going to do here is we've got a pre-configured script. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up the PowerShell editor here. And so this this script is something that we actually wrote for our new book, isn't it, Emil?
It is.
So a couple of things are going to be required in order to get this done, and we'll cover some of these topics in later videos. One of them is the actual creation of the ISO that we're going to use to build the lab environment. So there is a process that's pretty well documented right now. And where can people find some more information on the base construct and the build of, you know, their own hydration ISO?
By the creator of the hydration process. His name is Johan Arwoodmark. You can view all of his posts on the building and the configuring of hydration, and that's on deploymentresearch.com.
So let's just take a look and see what this actual ISO looks like here. It's about 20-ish gigs or so. And what we're going to do is we're just going to attach this ISO file to some VMs that we're going to create. So these virtual machines that we're going to create, we probably need, what, about 7, 8 virtual machines to do a lot of the work that we're going to do in most of our labs. And it can be kind of a pain to have to go through and to create these virtual machines manually, right? So like a normal process that you'd have to go through, you'd have to right-click in Hyper-V, new virtual machine, you have to give it a name, stage a folder, you'd also have to take and set the RAM and the hard drive and the network adapter and create all the virtual switches and all of that stuff, right? So there's actually quite a few clicks that would go into building the base shell of this environment, right?
Absolutely, and you've got to do it more than 3 times. So if you've got to do it more than 3 times, we've got to be able to automate this. So how can we automate the creation of all these virtual machines?
Well, the answer is PowerShell. So PowerShell is absolutely our friend. So why don't we show everybody how we can do this? Okay, so a couple things that my script is going to do here. It's going to create a virtual switch, an internal virtual switch in Hyper-V called AWD. In case you're wondering, what does AWD stand for, Emil?
AWD stands for Advanced Windows Deployments, which is the title of our new book.
Awesome. So it would make sense that we would actually start labeling things inside of our labs kind of the same way.
It's just a little shameless plug.
So a couple of things you can do when you download this script for yourself. You can actually choose the number of workstations that you'd like to create, because sometimes you have a lab environment, you might only need 4 workstations, some you might need 8, some you might need 800. So all that you do is just change this variable inside of the script itself, and our script will go ahead and build that number of virtual machines. For our examples, the only thing that you have to do is we're just going to need 4 of them, all right? And so we've also got another cleanup function that's been built into the script, because sometimes you want to start over, right, Emil? Sometimes you deploy a lab and it'd be really nice to just start over and try again, right?
That's right.
So we kind of have a little bit of a dangerous function that's built into the script, and it's called delete lab VMs. So we'll show you how this works, but you have to use this with caution, because if you don't, you might end up deleting some stuff that you don't really want to. So you make sure that when you're working on these machines, this is a clean test environment. These scripts are not designed for a production environment. They're designed for your home lab. That's the purpose of them. If you want to bring them into production, you have to modify accordingly. Okay?
Right. So what Dave means here is if you have other virtual machines on your computer right now, don't run this script. It very well may delete everything that you have.
All right. So what we'll do is let's go ahead and let's just run the script. We're not going to go walk through all the PowerShell code here. So we'll play the script. And, oh, it looks like it's creating a virtual machine. So let's go ahead and let's see what's going on here. Oh, I see some stuff popping into Hyper-V there, Emil. Let's change the focus here so we can see what's going on. And so we've got a generic naming convention that occurs when we create and build the lab here. And so the generic naming convention is going to take and is just going to create them as lab-hydration. And then you can see that we quickly go ahead and we rename those VMs to the ones that are going to be applicable. So I can see I've got a domain controller right here. So I can see my DC here. I've got a configuration manager VM that's getting ready, as well as an MDT server and a few workstations that are in here as well. So that script is actually finished. And now if I go on to our domain controller, I can take and connect to this. and we can see that we're now booting into the ready-made ISO from the hydration kit. And this was built using the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, which is great because you can actually use the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit for not only deploying workstations, it works incredibly well for deploying servers as well. So you can deploy SQL servers, Exchange servers, domain controllers, pretty much anything you want. Any of that logic that you need is going to be included in there. So our next step of the process here is going to be building the domain controller first. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through the steps here in the video to build the domain controller. We're then just going to pause the video. We're going to just jump forward in time because it's going to take a few minutes to actually build that domain controller. Once that domain controller is built, then we can go ahead and build the rest of the machines. Because there's a prerequisite requirement in our lab that the other machines have to be able to join a domain. So if there's no domain controller existing yet, it's not going to work very well. So what you have to do whenever you build these with hydration, always make sure that your domain controllers get built first, and then you can build the rest of the subsequent components. So while we're waiting for this, Emil, I have a really important question for you. On the type of hardware that we have here in our baselining and performance testing that we've done, how long does it actually take to provision this environment? Does it take a week?
No, it's down to an hour, I think an hour and 20 minutes. Using Server 2012 R2 and Windows 8. What we've noticed recently, which is really kind of cool, is deploying the same environment using Server 10 and Windows 10 has cut that deployment down to almost half.
That's amazing. So now that we're actually into the selection screen, all I'd have to do here is just choose DC01, okay, and then I'm just going to hit next. And that's it. I just let this go. So what we're going to do now is we'll just pause the video. As soon as DC1 is finished, we'll come back to you, and then we'll build the rest of the environment. All right, we're back, and as we can see, our domain controller has nicely finished here. So we have Active Directory deployed inside of this virtual machine. So at the end of these deployments of the hydration kit, you'll always see a nice little completed status message here. So I can close this down. And one of the things I want to do is I just want to really quickly validate that, Active Directory is indeed up and running inside of this virtual machine. So what we'll do is we'll just open up Active Directory users and computers. And as we can see, this is launching. So Emil, what's our domain name that we run for our lab environments here?
It's corp.viamonstra.com. ViaMonstra is a fictitious organization that we use to do a lot of real-world testing using real-world solutions that we deploy.
Awesome. And so this was kind of the foundation that we used for the book as well, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, perfect. And so as you can see, one of the unique things that the hydration kit has done is it's added via script some additional security groups that have been pre-created here. We've got some user accounts and we've got some service accounts that have been created as part of the build. And so these service accounts will actually be used when we go to automatically provision our configuration manager server, correct?
That is wonderful, Dave. Now, I just have a question for you. If we weren't to do this hydration process in 20 minutes or whatever it took, how long would it take someone to get to this far doing it step by step?
Oh, I would say generally speaking, to deploy a domain controller, build all the OUs, groups, stuff like that, just in a click count alone, you're probably hundreds, if not thousands of clicks. And there's a lot of opportunity to make mistakes in there, typing in passwords wrong or user accounts. So this is where the power of scripting and automation really comes in, because we always get a consistent work product. So even if you're not going to use the hydration or this concept for taking and building and provisioning environments from scratch for your home lab, take consideration on scripting your builds and the provisioning of your user accounts when you install product, because then you can always have a repeatable and consistent experience. Now, both Emil and I have the advantage over maybe some people that are out there working at organizations with a full-time job. As IT professionals. We're also IT consultants as well. So oftentimes we have to do the same job over and over again. So for us, having a repeatable experience with our customers is also very important. And this is one of the ways that we do it. Okay, so are we happy with that, Emil? We're happy that that's built out for us now?
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Okay.
And now we're back. We've had a wonderful supper and we've got full bellies. We've got back into the studio and our configuration manager environment looks like it's been completed.
So we can see the hydration completed screen here. So I'll just go ahead and I'm going to close this down, Emil. And now what are some of the things that we can do to actually check to make sure that this has been deployed properly?
Well, I guess the most logical thing would be, let's go see if we can go and launch the configuration manager console.
All right. Okay, so I can see the icons there for the Configuration Manager console. I guess that's a good start for us. Go ahead and launch that. Normally what we would do is just pin this to our start menu, but that's fine. So this is the first time launching, and there you go. Looks like we've actually got Configuration Manager built out here. But one of the problems that we found, Emil, is that when going through this hydration process, there's nothing in here.
No,
we don't have any computers. There's no objects. There's nothing actually in this environment, is there?
So although we've got a functioning configuration manager server here now, we think, we can't do anything with it. We've got to take this now to the next step. We've got to get computers in here. We've got to get some software in here to deploy. We still need to add network access accounts and configure software updates, get our MDT integration created, and a bunch of other steps.
All right, so Emil, what are some of the takeaways that our viewers can learn from our session that we did today here?
Well, we've gone over the process of hydration and why it's so important. It gives you a consistent build process no matter how many times you go in and build a lab environment. Building these things, you don't want to leave yourself prone to making mistakes or leaving out a step. So this really, really etches in that background infrastructure that's required to build your lab.
So we've provided some sample PowerShell scripts, and I think that's also another really important key point to take away is that PowerShell really is our friend, and we can do a lot of amazing things with it. And the best part about PowerShell is there's a ton of free samples out there, our code included. And so where could people possibly download our scripts from?
Well, our scripts are included with our books, so they can be downloaded from deploymentfundamentals.com.
Awesome. And does somebody actually have to buy our book to get those, or are they just freely available for download?
No, they're freely available for download. Now, granted, we recommend you buy our book because there's a lot of great information in there. But no, it's not required to get these sample files.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you on the next broadcast.
Have a great day.